They gave the infertile alien princess to a human as a joke, but she returned as a mother. Leora, the young princess of the Varen Empire, knew this better than anyone. She had been raised in grand halls of crystal and light, taught to speak, to reason, and to command respect. But among the counselors and rulers of neighboring worlds, she was whispered about as something less than perfect. Infertile, they said. It was a cruel joke, or so they thought. The Clyran Empire, known for its cunning and sharp humor, had decided to play the ultimate prank. They would gift Princess Leora to a human, as if she were nothing more than a collectible, a way to humiliate her and the Varens. The chosen human was Elias, a scientist who had spent his life studying alien communication. He lived on a small, green planet at the edge of a star system, a world of rolling hills and sparkling rivers, untouched by political games or interstellar wars. When the royal envoy arrived, bearing the princess in her ceremonial robes, Elias stared in disbelief. "I'm honored, I suppose," he said cautiously, bowing as politely as he could. His hands were slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the surreal reality of what he was witnessing. Leora, her eyes like deep pools of sapphire, simply raised an eyebrow. "This is not an honor," she said, her voice smooth but sharp like polished glass. "This is a joke." Elias blinked, unsure how to respond. The envoy smiled almost gleefully. "The council believes this arrangement will be entertaining," he said. "Princess Leora, you will live with this human, learn his ways, show us how powerless you truly are." Leora's jaw tightened. She had heard whispers of human ingenuity, their surprising resilience, and their strange, emotional strength. But she had never imagined she would meet one in such circumstances, thrust into a life designed to humiliate her. Elias led her to his small home, a modest structure made of clay bricks and wood. It had large windows that looked out over a forest, sunlight spilling across the floors in golden patterns. Leora stepped inside carefully, observing everything: the simple furniture, the small library of scientific texts, the tiny laboratory in one corner. "Your council sends me as a gift," Elias said finally. He tried to keep his voice neutral, but a hint of apology slipped through. "I don't know why." Leora turned, looking at him fully for the first time. "Why do humans always apologize for things they did not do?" she asked, her tone curious but not unkind. Elias laughed nervously. "Because sometimes we feel guilty for living in a peaceful place while the rest of the galaxy, well, the rest of the galaxy is complicated." "Complicated is a polite word for dangerous," she replied, a small smirk tugging at her lips. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself a faint glimmer of humor. The first few days were awkward. Leora found herself waking at dawn to the sound of birds rather than the ceremonial bells of her palace. Meals were simple: fruit, bread, water, and she realized that despite her initial disdain, the food tasted good. She could feel the energy of the planet in every bite, the sunlight on her skin, the gentle breeze. It was different. Elias, for his part, tried to show her the small joys of his world. They walked through the forest, noting the patterns of plants and insects. He explained human inventions, simple machines that turned wind and water into energy. He shared stories of explorers and inventors, people who had changed their worlds without armies or empires. Leora listened politely at first, but gradually she found herself drawn into his passion for discovery. One evening, as they sat beside a river watching the sun set, Elias turned to her. "Do you ever feel trapped?" he asked softly. Leora's gaze was fixed on the reflection of the sky in the water. "Every day," she admitted. "The council, my title, even the whispers about my condition. It feels as if I am a puppet and everyone else knows the strings." Elias nodded. "I think humans often feel trapped too. But sometimes being trapped teaches us to find our own strength, our own ways to move." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "And what if the world laughs at our efforts?" "Then we laugh back," Elias said simply. Leora could not help but smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. As weeks passed, their routine settled into something almost peaceful. Leora explored the forests, cataloging plants and wildlife with Elia's guidance. She learned how to cook simple meals, how to mend her own clothes, even how to repair small machines in Elia's laboratory. The princess who had been sent as a joke began to find her own purpose, her own voice, in the quiet corners of a human world. But the galaxy outside did not remain quiet. News of the gifted princess spread quickly. Ambassadors whispered behind closed doors. Some laughed, believing the Varen princess reduced to a human's household companion. Others watched with curiosity, wondering what a human and an alien princess might teach each other. One afternoon, as Leora tended a garden Elias had built, she noticed something strange. A small plant which had struggled for weeks to grow now bloomed brilliantly in the sunlight. She knelt beside it, touching its petals gently. "Life can be stronger than we expect," she murmured to herself. Elias appeared behind her. "It's not just the plant," he said. "I think you're learning something about yourself too." Leora considered his words. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps strength did not come only from empires, titles, or armies. Perhaps it could come from patience, from care, from the quiet determination to keep going even when the universe seemed to mock you. That night, as they shared a simple dinner, Leora found herself laughing at a story Elias told about a human scientist who had tried to teach a robot to dance. The council's joke had brought her here, yes, but she realized that laughter, curiosity, and genuine friendship were more powerful than ridicule. In the darkness outside, stars shone with indifference, watching the unfolding of lives they would never fully understand. But within the small home on a quiet green planet, two unlikely companions discovered something that even the galaxy could not mock: trust. Leora still remembered the council's words, the cruel whispers of her supposed infertility. But now, for the first time, she felt that she could face the world on her own terms. Perhaps the council had thought to humiliate her. Instead, they had given her something far more valuable: a chance to learn, to grow, and to discover strength she had never known she possessed. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of curiosity began to grow, a question she dared not speak aloud yet. If life could bloom in the smallest corner of a garden, in the care of a human, then perhaps there were possibilities for her own life that she had never imagined. The joke had begun in mockery, but it had planted something else entirely: hope. And hope, as Leora would soon discover, could change everything. The morning sun filtered through the tall trees of Elias' planet, casting long, golden shadows across the forest floor. Leora walked quietly along a narrow path, her fingers brushing the leaves of unfamiliar plants. Each day, she felt the world differently, more alive, more immediate, more hers. The council had tried to mock her, but here, among humans and simple life, she began to understand something the galaxy's rulers could never teach. Strength was not always loud or sharp. Sometimes it was quiet, persistent, and gentle. Elias was already at the clearing where he conducted his experiments, kneeling beside a small pool of water. He looked up when Leora approached, a smile tugging at his lips. "Good morning, princess," he said. "Or should I say, Leora?" She gave him a faint smile. Titles were not important here. "Leora is enough," she replied. He nodded. "Then, Leora, are you ready to continue?" She raised an eyebrow. "Continue what?" Elias held up a small device, shaped like a delicate crystal with faint lights flickering inside. "The study of plant communication, or at least how humans try to understand it." Leora tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. She had learned much about human machines, but this was different. This device, Elias explained, could detect subtle vibrations in plants, translating them into patterns humans could interpret. "It's like listening to what the plant feels," he said. "Every living thing has a voice if you know how to hear it." Leora's eyes widened. And humans can listen to such small voices, Elias shrugged. We try. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but we always try. The words resonated with her. For centuries, her own species had prized strength, strategy, and authority above all else. And yet here was a human who found power in patience, in attention, in care. She could not help but respect him. Over the next weeks, their bond grew steadily. They explored forests and rivers, cataloging the flora and fauna of the planet. Elias taught her how to make simple devices that could monitor growth, water levels, and sunlight. Leora, in turn, shared her knowledge of interstellar navigation and alien biology. She was amazed by the subtle differences between her world and his. The Varans saw everything through structure, hierarchy, and tradition, but humans saw patterns, relationships, and possibilities. One afternoon, as they rested beside a crystal-clear lake, Elias asked a question that made her pause. Do you ever wish you could just choose your path, without the council, without politics? Leora thought for a moment. She had spent so many years bound by duty and expectation that the idea of freedom seemed almost foreign. I have dreamed of it, she admitted softly. But dreams are not enough. One cannot simply step outside a world built on rules and expectations. Elias smiled. Sometimes you don't need to step outside. Sometimes you just need someone to walk beside you while you find the path yourself. Her heart skipped a beat. There was a simplicity to his words, a kind of honesty she had rarely encountered in her life. For the first time, Leora felt as though she was not being judged, not measured, not mocked. She could simply be herself. Days turned into weeks, and Leora found herself laughing more than she had in years. Elias had a way of turning small failures into lessons, of showing joy in effort rather than victory. They built a small greenhouse together, nurturing fragile plants that had struggled to survive. Leora realized that her own strength was growing alongside them. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Elias turned to her with a question. Do you ever think that maybe the council was wrong about you? She hesitated, staring at the reflection of the moons in the water. They do not understand, she said quietly. They think I am powerless because I cannot fulfill a role they expect. They do not see me as I am. Elias reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers. Maybe that is their mistake. Maybe power is not about fulfilling expectations, but about creating your own. Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not her tutors, not her advisors, not even her own family. Here, among the quiet hills and rivers, she felt a spark of something dangerous and wonderful. Hope. In the following days, Leora began experimenting with ideas she had long suppressed. She designed small tools for farming, studied local wildlife, and even suggested modifications to Elias' devices. He encouraged her every step of the way, never belittling, never mocking. And slowly, the princess who had been sent as a joke began to see herself differently. But it was not just the work that changed her. It was the small moments of connection, the shared meals, the quiet conversations by the fire, the laughter over human clumsiness or alien formalities. Leora realized that she had not known friendship before, at least not like this. The council's prank had intended to humiliate her, but instead, it had given her something she never thought she could have: companionship, trust, and understanding. One morning, as they walked along a stream, Leora stopped abruptly. Elias, look at this, she said, pointing to a tiny plant struggling to grow between rocks. Elias knelt beside her, examining it carefully. It's tough, but it's trying, he said. Leora smiled. It reminds me of life, how it continues even when conditions are difficult. Elias nodded. Exactly. And sometimes you just need a little patience, a little care, and a lot of hope. They worked together, carefully loosening the soil, moving small stones, and ensuring the plant received sunlight. It was tedious work, but Leora felt a sense of satisfaction she had never known in palace life. Here, She could see the immediate results of effort and care. She could nurture life, and life would respond. That evening, as they returned to their small home, Leora's mind wandered to her own existence. The council's cruel words, the rumors of infertility, they seemed distant, almost meaningless here. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps she could redefine herself, not as a princess bound by duty, but as someone who chose her own path. Elias noticed the thoughtful look on her face. "You're thinking about the council, aren't you?" he asked gently. She laughed softly. "I cannot stop thinking about them entirely. They are always there, even in memory, but perhaps they do not define me." "Good," Elias said simply, "because no one should define you except yourself." The days passed in this rhythm: work, learning, laughter, and quiet reflection. Leora found herself growing not just in knowledge, but in confidence. She began to see that her value was not determined by the council's judgments, nor by her ability to fulfill their expectations. It was determined by her actions, her choices, and the care she offered to others. One night, as the moons hung low and silver in the sky, Leora stood outside, looking at the stars. Elias joined her, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "if we are part of something larger, something beyond politics, beyond power?" Elias looked up at the stars, then back at her. "I do. I think the universe is full of possibilities. And maybe the people who find them are the ones who care enough to try." Her heart swelled at his words. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of expectation lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and potential. She realized that life, in all its unpredictability, had given her a second chance, not as a pawn of the council, but as someone capable of shaping her own destiny. And in that quiet, human world, surrounded by forests, rivers, and the laughter of a man who had never been told he was powerless, Leora began to believe something extraordinary. That friendship, care, and hope could grow stronger than any insult, any judgment, any decree from men. Empire. The council's joke had brought her here, yes, but it had also revealed something they could never understand. Strength did not always come from titles, armies, or influence. Sometimes it came from patience, understanding, and the willingness to nurture life, no matter how small or fragile. And as Leora looked at Elias, standing beside her with a quiet confidence of his own, she felt the first real stirrings of something new, something that could change not just her life, but the course of the future. In the distance, the forests whispered, the rivers sang, and the stars watched silently. And within this small, green world, a human and an alien princess discovered something remarkable: the power of unlikely friendship. A friendship that could, one day, defy expectations, overcome ridicule, and perhaps even reshape the galaxy itself. The days on Elias' planet had grown longer, warmer, and filled with subtle discoveries. Leora had settled into a rhythm she had never imagined possible, working with Elias, exploring forests, and observing the small, intricate lives of plants and animals. Each day felt like a lesson, not only about this planet but about herself. One morning, Leora awoke earlier than usual. The soft golden light of dawn spilled through the windows, and the hum of birds greeted her. She felt different, not in the way humans might describe emotion, but as a subtle warmth spreading from her chest. She paused, uncertain, then shook her head. Perhaps it was just the beauty of the morning. When she joined Elias in the greenhouse, she found him adjusting a device that monitored the growth of plants. "Good morning, Leora," he said. "Sleep well." "Strangely," she replied. "I feel unusual." Elias glanced at her thoughtfully. "Unusual in a good way," she considered this. "Perhaps," she said cautiously, "it is as if something is stirring inside me." He studied her quietly for a moment. "Do you remember when we talked about potential?" he asked. "About life having hidden strengths," Leora nodded. "I remember." "Well," Elias said carefully, "sometimes hidden potential is not just in machines or plants. Sometimes it is in us. Leora looked at him, intrigued but skeptical. Are you saying that what I feel could be part of my own potential? I don't know exactly, Elias admitted, but I do know that humans often find strength in unexpected places. Perhaps the same is true for your species. She pondered his words as she worked. The greenhouse, filled with sunlight and the soft hum of life, seemed alive in a way that mirrored her own feelings. It was as if the plants themselves were whispering secrets she had not known, secrets about growth, resilience, and life. Over the next few days, Leora began to notice subtle changes. Her energy was different, more focused. She could tend to multiple tasks at once without fatigue. She felt emotions more deeply, yet more clearly. And most surprisingly, she found herself thinking of life in a new way, not as a series of obligations, but as possibilities waiting to be nurtured. One evening, Elias sat with her beside the river, the water reflecting the soft light of twin moons. He watched her silently for a time before speaking. "Leora," he said gently, "have you ever wondered if perhaps the council was wrong about you?" She looked up at him, the moonlight catching her eyes. "I have," she admitted. "For a long time I thought they knew everything about me, but now I am beginning to doubt it." "Doubt is the beginning of understanding," Elias said. "Sometimes what others say about us is not a reflection of our true nature. It is only a reflection of their limitations." Leora considered this. The council had labeled her as infertile, powerless, and weak. Yet here she was, tending life, learning, growing, and feeling a strength she had never known. Perhaps they had been wrong all along. A few days later, a healer arrived from a nearby settlement. Elias had invited her, hoping to learn more about Leora's physiology, which differed greatly from humans. The healer, a calm and wise woman, examined Leora carefully, noting subtle shifts in energy and vitality. "You are unlike what the council described," the healer said finally. "Your body has potential that has lain dormant. It is rare, but it can awaken under the right conditions." Leora's breath caught. "Dormant potential," she repeated. "Are you saying I might not be infertile?" The healer smiled gently. "I am saying that life can surprise us. It responds to trust, care, and emotional bonds. What you feel now, this warmth, this connection, is a sign that possibilities you had thought lost may not be lost at all." Elia's hand found hers, squeezing it lightly. "See," he said softly. "I told you, strength can be found in unexpected places." For the first time in years, Leora allowed herself to hope. She had spent so long believing the council's words, their whispers of limitation, that she had never imagined a different truth. And now, with Elias by her side, she realized that life might still hold possibilities she had thought impossible. The following weeks were filled with quiet experimentation and exploration. Leora and Elias documented changes, nurtured plants, and observed the subtle signs of life awakening. Each day, she felt more attuned to the rhythms of her own body, her emotions, and her mind. She discovered that patience, care, and trust were not just human virtues, they were universal keys to unlocking potential. One afternoon, as they walked through a meadow of wildflowers, Elias turned to her. "Leora, do you feel different?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. I feel as if something within me is waking. It is not just physical, it is emotional, spiritual, something deeper than I can name." "Good," he said, "because sometimes the universe gives us signs in ways we do not immediately understand. You are learning to listen to yourself, to life, and to what is possible." As they continued their walk, Leora noticed a small bird struggling to build a nest. She approached it gently, guiding the twigs and leaves with careful hands. The bird chirped softly, responding to her touch, and soon it settled into a small, sturdy nest. Leora felt a quiet joy, a sense of accomplishment that was entirely different from the ceremonial successes of her youth. Here she had created life, nurtured potential, and witnessed growth firsthand. That evening, under the soft glow of the moons, Leora spoke softly to Elias. I feel something new. Perhaps the council was wrong about me in more ways than one. Perhaps life is more than duty and expectation. Perhaps it is also possibility. Elias smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yes, and possibilities are where hope lives. For the first time, Leora allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the council's judgments. She pictured a life filled with learning, growth, and connection. She imagined herself not as a pawn, but as someone capable of shaping her own destiny. And somewhere deep within, she began to imagine something even more extraordinary, the possibility of creating life herself, despite what she had been told. The realization was both exhilarating and frightening. She had spent centuries, or so it felt, believing in limitations. Now those limitations were falling away, replaced by possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Over the next few days, Leora and Elias worked even more closely. They experimented with nurturing techniques, observing the response of plants and animals to care and attention. Leora discovered that her own energy seemed to influence growth, a subtle resonance that mirrored the healer's earlier words. She could feel life responding to her presence, her thoughts, and her touch. One evening, as they rested by the fire, Leora turned to Elias. Do you think that perhaps I am capable of more than they told me, more than even I thought? Elias took her hand in his. I do. I have seen it in you every day. You are discovering strength, resilience, and potential that no council, no empire, and no rule can ever take away. Leora felt a surge of gratitude and warmth. The council's mockery, the whispers of infertility, and the endless expectations of duty had not destroyed her. They had led her here, to a place where she could grow, learn, and discover her own true power. And in the quiet of the human world, surrounded by forests, rivers, and the simple, unwavering support of Elias, she began to understand something extraordinary. The galaxy's judgments could never define her. Her choices, her actions, and her care could. And if life could bloom in the smallest plant, in the most fragile creature, perhaps it could also bloom in her. The healer's words echoed in her mind. Life responds to trust, care, and emotional bonds. She realized that the bond she shared with Elias was not just friendship. It was a connection that could awaken hidden potential, a trust that could transform her life in ways the council could never imagine. That night, as the moons reflected on the river's surface, Leora looked at Elias with new understanding. I feel ready, she whispered, ready to see what is possible. Elias smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the moons. Then we will face it together. Whatever comes, we will discover it together. For the first time in her life, Leora felt truly alive. The council's joke, meant to humiliate her, had instead led her to discovery, growth, and hope. She realized that the universe was larger and more mysterious than she had ever known, and that her life, her choices, and her potential were hers to shape. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, unspoken hope began to grow, an idea so new, so fragile, yet so powerful that Leora could barely name it. But she would soon. The news traveled faster than the fastest starship. Across systems and galaxies, whispers began to spread, about a princess who had been sent as a joke, about a human who had been entrusted with her care, and about a quiet transformation no one had expected. The council had intended humiliation, yet now, Leora's story was taking a different shape. She was no longer a pawn in political games. She was a symbol of possibility. The first message arrived in Elia's small home one morning. It was from an interstellar envoy, asking for the princess's presence at the council chambers. Leora held the message, her fingers steady. She felt no fear, only a sense of quiet confidence that had been growing for months. I suppose they expect me to return humiliated, she said softly to Elias. He smiled. Perhaps, but you are no longer the person they think they know. You are stronger, wiser, and more capable than they will ever believe. Leora nodded. She realized that the council's joke had served its purpose, but not the way they intended. It had pushed her into a life where she could discover her own strength, where she could learn, grow, and choose her own path. And now she would return, not as a pawn, but as someone who had found power in her own way. The journey to the council chambers was filled with anticipation. Elias accompanied her, not as a servant or subordinate, but as a partner, equal in every way. He had taught her the value of patience, empathy, and ingenuity, and she knew that his presence would remind the council that power could come from unexpected places. When they arrived, the grand halls of the council were filled with murmurs. Diplomats, ambassadors, and rulers from across the galaxy gathered, expecting to see a princess humbled, fragile, and obedient. What they saw instead was a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence, her eyes bright with intelligence and calm authority. Leora stepped forward. The council's leader, a tall, imposing figure with silvered hair, regarded her carefully. "Princess Leora," he said, "you have returned, and it seems you are unchanged by your circumstances." Leora met his gaze steadily. "I am changed," she said softly, yet with certainty. "I am stronger, wiser, and more capable than you believe, but not because of your judgments, not because of your expectations, and certainly not because of your mockery. I am changed because I chose to learn, to grow, and to care, and I am here now to show that true strength comes from understanding, patience, and compassion." A ripple ran through the council chambers. Many whispered among themselves. Some had expected humiliation. What they saw instead was dignity and quiet power. The council leader frowned, his voice carrying authority. "And what of the accusations regarding your infertility?" Leora smiled, a gentle but firm expression. "Those accusations were false. Life responds to care, trust, and connection. I have discovered that the universe is full of possibilities and that some judgments, especially cruel ones, cannot define who we truly are." There was a pause. The whispers grew louder, not mocking but curious. The council had tried to control her, to limit her, to turn her life into a spectacle. And now she was defying them, not with armies or politics, but with evidence of growth, learning, and resilience. Elias stepped forward, standing beside her. "She is not alone," he said quietly. "Human and alien can learn from each other, support each other, and create something stronger together, and that is what we have done." The council's silence was telling. Leora had not come with threats or complaints. She had come with proof of what could be achieved when judgment and cruelty were replaced with care, curiosity, and partnership. As the days passed, the galaxy began to watch more closely. Planets and systems that had once laughed at the council's joke now shared stories of Leora and Elias, the human who had inspired growth in a princess, and the princess who had learned the quiet power of life and connection. Leora's return was more than a personal triumph. It became a symbol that even the most powerful beings could be wrong about others, a symbol that care, empathy, and courage could surpass mockery, assumptions, and prejudice. And quietly, it was also a symbol of what was possible for life itself: growth, renewal, and creation. One afternoon, as she walked through the council's gardens, she felt a familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she had noticed weeks before. The healer's words echoed in her mind. Life responds to trust, care, and emotional bonds. She realized then that her bond with Elias had not only nurtured her strength, but had awakened possibilities within her that had been dormant for far too long. She turned to him, a soft smile on her face. "I feel ready," she said. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Then whatever comes next, we face it together." The council eventually summoned her for a formal ceremony. Ambassadors and rulers gathered to witness the princess who had been mocked for her supposed weaknesses. Leora entered with calm dignity, Elias at her side. The room was quiet, filled with anticipation, curiosity, and in some corners disbelief. The council leader spoke first. "Princess Leora, you have returned, and it seems the council's intentions have not gone as planned. Leora held her head high. No, they have not. The council sought to humiliate me, to show weakness where there was none. Instead, I have discovered strength, growth, and possibility, and I have learned that the universe cannot be constrained by cruelty or doubt. Life responds to care, trust, and connection, and I have learned to embrace that fully. She paused, looking around at the gathered rulers. I have also learned that partnership, understanding, and compassion are more powerful than arrogance, assumptions, or mockery. A human has shown me this, and together, we have discovered potential that neither of us could have realized alone. Gasps and murmurs ran through the room. Some council members shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their judgments had been both premature and wrong. The joke they had intended had become a lesson they had not expected to learn. Leora continued, her voice calm but firm. I return not as a pawn, not as a subject of ridicule, but as someone who has discovered the strength within herself. And I offer this message to the galaxy. Power is not only in titles, armies, or decrees. True strength is in care, resilience, and the courage to nurture life in whatever form it may take. The chamber fell silent. Even the council leader found no words, his authority unable to counter the quiet power of truth. Outside the council halls, news spread quickly. Across planets and systems, beings who had once mocked or doubted began to share tales of Leora and Elias. Children listened in awe, adults reconsidered their assumptions, and leaders began to understand that compassion and partnership could change even the most entrenched beliefs. In the weeks that followed, Leora continued to nurture life, both in her surroundings and within herself. The bond she shared with Elias deepened, not just as companionship, but as a connection that had awakened hidden potential. And with each day, she felt more certain that the universe had possibilities far beyond what she had been told. The council, initially intending to embarrass her, had inadvertently created a story that inspired countless beings. A princess who had been sent as a joke returned as a symbol of resilience, growth, and hope. And at the heart of it all was the quiet, human truth that care, trust, and partnership could awaken the strongest forms of life, whether in plants, creatures, or even in the heart of an alien princess. One evening, as Leora and Elias stood atop a hill overlooking the council city, she felt a stirring, a deeper, more profound sense of life within her. It was no longer just potential, it was possibility taking shape, a reminder that life could defy even the cruelest assumptions. Elias looked at her, reading the change in her eyes. I think the universe has more in store for you than even we imagined, he said softly. She smiled, feeling warmth, hope, and quiet determination. Yes, she whispered, and I am ready to embrace it. For the first time, Leora realized that the council's joke had failed spectacularly. They had sought to humiliate, but instead, they had revealed the extraordinary. They had forced her into a world where she could discover her own power, her own voice, and her own potential. And she would never be the same again. The galaxy watched, listened, and learned. And for Leora, the story was only beginning. The galaxy had watched Princess Leora's return with a mixture of awe and curiosity. A princess once mocked as powerless, sent to a human as a joke, had returned with quiet strength, wisdom, and dignity. Yet even as whispers of her courage spread, few could have predicted the transformation that was about to unfold. Months passed on Elias' planet, a world of green hills, clear rivers, and gentle sunlight. Leora and Elias had settled into a life that was simple in appearance but extraordinary in meaning. Together, they tended gardens, studied the stars, and explored the forests. Every action, every choice was a lesson in care, growth, and partnership. And somewhere deep inside, life was stirring, an extraordinary sign that the council had not anticipated. One morning, Leora awoke with a sense she had never known. A warmth spread through her, steady and strong, as if her very being resonated with the life of the world around her. She paused, feeling an emotion that was both terrifying and beautiful: hope. Elias noticed her silence and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am more than all right," she said softly. "I feel complete, as if something new is beginning." He smiled knowingly, having observed subtle signs in her energy, her vitality, and the small yet powerful changes in her body. The healer's words returned to him. Life responds to care, trust, and emotional bonds. It seemed that the quiet bond between human and princess had awakened something profound within Leora. Over the following weeks, Leora felt her potential grow in ways both gentle and undeniable. She could sense life in its smallest forms: the way a plant leaned toward sunlight, the way animals responded to touch, the subtle rhythms that connected all beings. But more than that, she felt a life within herself, a life that had been long dormant, now awakening with certainty and strength. The moment of realization came quietly. One evening, as the twin moons reflected on the surface of a calm river, Leora felt a stirring deep within her chest. She reached for Elias' hand, her eyes wide but radiant. "Elias," she whispered, I think the council was wrong in every way. I feel life within me. I am going to be a mother." Elias' expression softened with wonder and joy. "Then our journey has led to this," he said. "A life that was thought impossible is now becoming real. You are extraordinary, Leora." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of amazement and gratitude. The princess who had once been labeled infertile, mocked, and treated as a joke, now carried a future full of possibility within her. And the human who had walked beside her, cared for her, and inspired her had shared in this miracle, proving that strength and life could arise from trust, empathy, and courage. As news of her pregnancy reached the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Some ambassadors and rulers who had once laughed at the council's prank now looked on with admiration. The princess who had returned with dignity was now becoming a symbol of hope, a testament to resilience, partnership, and the quiet but powerful influence of humanity. Leora herself did not let this change her focus. She continued to study, explore, and nurture life. She trained herself to balance her new reality with her responsibilities, understanding that the growth within her mirrored the growth she fostered in the world around her. Every plant, every creature, every life she touched became a reflection of the life she now carried. Elias was by her side at every step, offering guidance, support, and unwavering belief. Together, they prepared not just for a child, but for the creation of a legacy, one that would blend the wisdom of humans and Vaerans, one that would embody hope, resilience, and unity. The council, observing from afar, began to understand the depth of their miscalculation. Their attempt to humiliate had instead cultivated a legend, a story that would inspire generations. Leora had returned as more than a princess. She had returned as a mother-to-be, radiant with strength, wisdom, and life. The months unfolded like the petals of a flower. Leora's body grew stronger, her mind sharper, and her heart fuller. She and Elias prepared a nursery filled with symbols of both their worlds: plants that thrived under careful tending, books filled with knowledge, and toys that sparked curiosity and imagination. The child they would bring into the galaxy would inherit not just life, but the values they cherished: curiosity, empathy, courage, and the belief that all beings could inspire greatness in one another. One night, as Leora rested under the stars, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the council's whispers, the humiliation intended by the Clyran Empire, and the doubts that had haunted her. And yet she realized that each challenge, each insult, had led her to this very moment. They had underestimated her, underestimated the power of growth, and underestimated the quiet influence of human compassion. Elias joined her, placing a hand on her belly, feeling the subtle movements of the new life within. "Can you feel it?" he asked, voice soft and filled with wonder. "I can," Leora replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I am amazed. I never imagined this could be possible." "You imagined it now," Elias said, "and that's what matters. Life thrives on hope and you have nurtured it." As the moons cast silver light across the landscape, Leora felt a deep connection, not just to the life within her, but to the world around her, to Elias, and to the universe itself. She understood now that true strength was not in titles, armies, or decrees, but in care, patience, and the courage to nurture life wherever it is found. The day of the birth arrived quietly, without fanfare, on Elia's green planet. Surrounded by warmth, gentle light, and the soft hum of life, Leora brought a child into the galaxy, a child that symbolized unity, hope, and the extraordinary power of partnership. The child's first cries echoed softly through the room, a sound filled with promise, curiosity, and life itself. Leora held the child close, feeling a profound sense of completion. She had journeyed from a princess mocked for her supposed weakness to a mother who embodied strength, growth, and possibility. And beside her, Elias shared in the wonder, knowing that together they had defied expectations, rewritten assumptions, and created a legacy that would endure far beyond themselves. The galaxy would remember this story, not as one of humiliation, but as a testament to hope. It would tell of the human who inspired an alien princess, of the princess who discovered her hidden potential, and of the life that arose from trust, care, and courage. The tale became a legend, shared across worlds, inspiring countless beings to believe in the power of possibility, partnership, and compassion. Leora named her child Kaelin, a name that meant gift of life in the Varen tongue. It was fitting, for Kaelin represented the life that had been thought impossible, the union of two worlds, and the enduring lesson that strength can grow from patience, love, and understanding. As Leora and Elias watched Kaelin explore the small garden beside their home, the child's laughter echoed across the hills and rivers. Birds and small creatures approached fearlessly, sensing the warmth and care radiating from the family. Leora realized that life, in all its forms, responds to kindness, trust, and nurturing. It was a truth that no empire, no council, and no judgment could ever change. In the years that followed, Leora continued to travel the galaxy, sharing her knowledge and experiences, teaching that true strength is often quiet but undeniable. She spoke of the human who had walked beside her, of the lessons learned in patience, empathy, and care, and of the life that had grown from love and trust. The council, once eager to humiliate, now acknowledged her wisdom and courage. But Leora cared little for their recognition. Her joy came from her child, her partner, and the life they nurtured together. She had proven to herself, and the galaxy, that the human heart, combined with curiosity and care, could inspire greatness even in the most extraordinary of beings. One evening, as the sun set across the hills, Leora held Kaelin close and looked at Elias. "We have done something remarkable," she whispered. "Yes," Elias agreed. "We have created life, hope, and a legacy that will endure far beyond us." Leora smiled, feeling the warmth of the child against her chest. "And it all began because of a human who believed in me." Elias laughed softly, and a princess who dared to trust him. Together, they watched the stars emerge, shining like distant promises across the universe. In that quiet moment, Leora understood that their story was more than survival, more than triumph. It was a testament to life, hope, and the extraordinary power of humanity, ordinary yet profound, small yet limitless. The galaxy, once indifferent or cruel, had been given a story of inspiration. A princess who had been sent as a joke had returned as a mother, a creator of life, a beacon of hope. And through her journey, all who heard her tale would remember one simple truth: strength is not only measured in armies, titles, or victories. True strength grows in care, trust, empathy, and the courage to nurture life, no matter where it is found. And in that strength, Leora, Elias, and Kaelin became a legacy that would endure for generations, a story of life, hope, and the quiet, unstoppable power of love. Interred without warning, the alien queen was caught off guard. Her surprise spoke volumes.